As Operation Enduring Freedom progressed into its middle and later phases, the United States and its coalition partners found themselves grappling with a far more complex reality than initially anticipated. The early collapse of the Taliban regime had created an illusion of decisive victory, but the underlying political, social, and geographic factors that sustained conflict in Afghanistan began resurfacing with alarming speed. In this period, roughly spanning from 2003 to 2010, OEF transformed from a fast, precise counterterrorism mission into a full-spectrum counterinsurgency and stabilization effort, one that required not only military might, but also diplomatic skill, development expertise, and cultural understanding. Yet these instruments of power were often applied unevenly, inconsistently, or without sufficient local knowledge, leading to a prolonged struggle marked by both progress and stagnation. One of the defining characteristics of this era was the growing insurgent sanctuary across the border in Pakistan. As coalition focus shifted toward reconstruction and stabilization efforts inside Afghanistan, Taliban leadership networks, including the Quetta Shura, the Haqqani Network, and Hizb-e-Islami factions, found refuge in Pakistan's tribal areas. These regions were governed only nominally by Islamabad, and therefore became ideal bases for training, fundraising, planning operations, and recruiting new fighters. The Pakistani government's dual policy, opposing domestic militants while tolerating or covertly supporting Afghan insurgent groups, further complicated U.S. strategy. Washington pressed Islamabad repeatedly to eliminate sanctuaries, yet deep mistrust and conflicting strategic priorities hindered cooperation. Pakistan's military viewed the Taliban as a counterweight to Indian influence in Afghanistan, making its full commitment to U.S. goals strategically unlikely. Meanwhile, NATO's expanding role altered the operational landscape. When ISAF assumed responsibility for security across all of Afghanistan, OEF shifted to narrower counterterrorism functions, but the distinction between the two missions often blurred in practice. Different countries introduced different national restrictions, known as caveats, on their troops, affecting where and how they could operate. Some nations avoided combat zones, leaving the heaviest fighting to U.S., British, Canadian, and Dutch forces. This unequal distribution of risk and responsibility created friction within the alliance and limited the overall effectiveness of the mission.
During this phase, insurgent attacks grew more sophisticated. The widespread use of improvised explosive devices, IEDs, became a signature Taliban tactic. These roadside bombs caused devastating casualties and forced NATO to invest heavily in armored vehicles, route clearance units, and electronic countermeasures. The tactical adaptation of the Taliban demonstrated their resilience. When faced with overwhelming firepower, they shifted from open confrontation to guerrilla warfare, blending into the population and avoiding direct engagements unless conditions were favorable. Their familiarity with rural terrains and ability to mobilize local support networks gave them strategic advantages that foreign forces struggled to counter. Parallel to the military struggle, the political landscape in Afghanistan was evolving but fraught with challenges. The government under Hamid Karzai attempted to extend administrative control, but governance outside major cities remained weak. Corruption became a defining issue, undermining public trust and fueling insurgent narratives. Many Afghans perceived government officials as self-serving or predatory, which created fertile ground for Taliban influence. In some rural districts, Taliban courts were viewed as more efficient, predictable, and less corrupt than the state's formal judicial system. This discrepancy demonstrated a foundational weakness in the effort to stabilize Afghanistan. Military victories could not compensate for governance failures. Development and reconstruction efforts, while massive in scale, often struggled to achieve sustainable outcomes. Billions of dollars flowed into Afghanistan through the Pentagon, USAID, NGOs, and international organizations. Roads, schools, clinics, and irrigation systems were built. However, many projects suffered from poor planning, local resistance, corruption, or lack of long-term maintenance. Additionally, development became intertwined with military operations in ways that sometimes blurred humanitarian neutrality and fueled local perceptions that aid was merely another tool of foreign control. The Hearts and Minds campaign, despite its noble intent, frequently underestimated the complexities of Afghan society, tribal dynamics, and economic realities. Strategically, the United States found itself fighting multiple wars simultaneously. The 2003 invasion of Iraq drained resources, attention, and political capital from Afghanistan. Key intelligence assets, special operations forces, and reconstruction funds were redirected to Iraq, leaving Afghanistan with insufficient manpower to secure gains achieved during the initial stages of OEF. Senior military officials later acknowledged that the Iraq War significantly delayed progress in Afghanistan and allowed insurgents to regain strength.
Even as challenges multiplied, Operation Enduring Freedom witnessed significant developments in military innovation. Drone technology advanced dramatically, providing real-time surveillance and the ability to strike high-value targets with precision. Special operations forces conducted night raids that disrupted insurgent networks, captured key leaders, and dismantled bomb-making cells. These actions inflicted constant pressure on insurgent groups, but also generated controversy, particularly when mistaken identities or faulty intelligence led to civilian harm. Villagers sometimes complained that such raids violated cultural norms and undermined alliances painstakingly built through years of outreach. By 2008, it became clear that the conflict was entering a decisive period. The Taliban were gaining momentum in southern and eastern Afghanistan, launching coordinated attacks, overrunning checkpoints, and challenging government authority in strategic districts. U.S. intelligence assessments warned that without a new strategy and significantly more resources, the mission risked failure. These warnings shaped the 2009 troop surge under President Obama, which marked one of the most ambitious counterinsurgency campaigns of the war. The surge aimed to reverse insurgent gains, strengthen Afghan security forces, and create conditions for an eventual U.S. withdrawal. It prioritized securing population centers, reducing civilian casualties, and building local government structures. The strategy also emphasized partnering with Afghan forces, requiring joint patrols, shared bases, and integrated operations. This approach helped professionalize segments of the Afghan National Army, though progress varied across units and regions.
In the southern provinces of Helmand and Kandahar, coalition forces launched major offensives to reclaim Taliban strongholds. Battles for towns such as Marha, Sangin, Panjwai, and Zari became pivotal moments in the surge era. These areas saw some of the most intense fighting of the entire war, with heavy casualties on both sides. Although coalition forces secured many contested zones, holding them proved difficult. The Taliban often withdrew during offensives only to return once troops redeployed to other areas. Throughout this period, the civilian population remained caught between warring sides. Villagers navigated a perilous environment where allegiances shifted frequently, and survival depended on predicting which group would control their district next. Many Afghans resented the corruption of government officials, feared reprisals from insurgents, and distrusted foreign forces, whose presence brought both protection and danger. These realities underscored the central challenge of Operation Enduring Freedom. Military power alone could not resolve a conflict rooted in political grievances, social fragmentation, and decades of instability. As the surge progressed, internal debates within the U.S. government intensified. Some officials argued that counterinsurgency was too costly and slow, advocating instead for a counterterrorism-focused approach relying on drones and special operations. Others maintained that without a stable Afghan state, terrorist networks would simply re-emerge. These conflicting visions created policy tensions that shaped the transition period leading to the formal end of OEF in 2014. Operation Enduring Freedom's middle years highlight the paradox at the heart of the mission. The United States was simultaneously trying to dismantle insurgent networks and build a nation-state in their place, all while navigating regional rivalries, cultural complexities, and shifting domestic political pressures. The pursuit of security, governance, and development proved far more interconnected and far more fragile than planners initially realized. What actually happened during this phase was not a straightforward military campaign, but a vast experiment in state building under fire, influenced by local realities and global politics in ways that reshaped the trajectory of the entire operation.